So I'm currently waiting for my GoPro to charge so I can take it down to the barn and get some training videos with Banksy. But I thought it would be fun to do this video because I was thinking about some things that people have said to me recently. And these are comments that happen pretty regularly. So I wanted to kind of do a rebuttal and just talk a little bit. And I prefer to do these live videos because then I don't have to edit them. It's a lot of work to like record and then edit and then upload. So I'd rather go live. And then people can just watch the replay. But lately, over the last while, I've been accused of having like a hidden agenda, an ulterior motive for criticizing the horse industry and talking about horse welfare. And it's something that comes up a lot from people who wish to defend like everything that I criticize. And I find it interesting for multiple reasons. The first of which is that I find it really interesting when people accuse welfare advocates of a hidden agenda, but they don't consider the fact that their favorite competition riders could have an agenda that leads them to mistreating the horses. Oh, hi, Melanie. I'm also autistic. What's up? and I think it's funny. So I wanted to talk about what my hidden agenda is because it's also not really hidden. And like I struggle to put this into words because I've been pretty open about the fact that my horsemanship has seen so much change, like largely because of my horse Milo. And like that's where the shift really started because before I got him, I was really entrenched in a lot of traditional training practices and he resisted a lot of them. Like I'd never before that had a horse that when you try to apply pressure to them and when you try to punish them that they would resist and they'd actually like square up with you and be ready to fight back. I'd never had that before. So him doing that really exposed a weakness in the training methods that I'd been taught to use. And I hadn't been taught alternatives to pressure and release or punishing the behaviors that I don't want. So now I had this horse who's trying to fight me when I tried to get after him for being bad, when really what I had was a horse who had been not handled very much. He was traumatized because he had a very rough upbringing as a baby. He starved from the point that he hit the ground as a foal until he was 2 years old. So my theory with him too is that I think that he has a lot of attachment issues and trauma because if you're starving, the mare that his mom probably wasn't producing enough milk because she's hungry, so he would have been hungry. And then also imagine how irritating it would be for a lactating mare who's not producing enough milk to have their foal continuously trying to feed. So I think that he was probably like chased off by his mom a lot and bullied by the other horses the few times they did get food because there would have been a lot of resource guarding because these horses were starving so much. So anyways, needless to say, he had a lot of trauma. And he is ultimately what really shifted my perspectives because he was a horse that, and still is, very clearly communicates. Like when he's not comfortable with something, he'll give a hard no. And it's in a way where a lot of people could get frustrated and they'd be going, this horse is just being difficult. He's just being naughty. He's just being disrespectful. He's just doing this to be bad. And then they would punish him accordingly. And he's also the type of horse that the madder someone gets at him and the more that they try to punish him, the more resistant he's likely to become. And then he's going to become a bigger and bigger problem. So in my eyes, and this is going to go into what my hidden agenda is. Don't worry, I'm getting there. In my eyes, he's like the quintessential type of horse that becomes the problem horse because you put pressure on them, they resist that pressure, they say no, they try to communicate their no, they try to say, hey, I'm uncomfortable. You apply more pressure, they still do it, they get bigger, they charge at you, they try to bite you, they try to kick you. Now they're the aggressive horse who really needs to be punished. And now you have a bad, dangerous horse. And he's the quintessential type of horse that with the wrong people could have had the crap abused out of him and then fallen through the cracks again and again and again. Or if they did break his spirit, which would be freaking devastating because he has such a strong spirit that to break it, you'd have to be horrifically rough with him. But if they did break his spirit, then you'd have this shell of a horse who's not happy and who's just going through the motions of what people are telling them to do because they have no other choice. So as I've learned more and as I've studied horse behavior and as I've started to reflect more on a lot of the normalized practices in the horse world, a lot of my thinking returns back to Milo because I think about how if he was given to someone else in this world, he wasn't as ready to change. And even with me, like I didn't change quickly enough and he still ran into problems with me and it was still unfair to him for a lot of years. but he's the type of horse that could have just ended up continuously falling through the cracks, going to home to home to home, and always being a problem, and having people be frustrated with his behavior and thinking that he's a bad horse or a horse that needs a rough hand, when really all he was wanting was understanding. So as I navigate the horse world, I see a lot of horses like Milo. I see horses who are difficult to handle, who might exhibit dangerous behaviors, and who might be really frustrating to work with. But instead of viewing it as a difficult, disrespectful horse like I might have in the past, I see a horse who's really struggling and who is desperately trying to communicate, hey, I'm not comfortable with this. Hey, I'm in pain. Hey, I'm super anxious. Hey, I'm confused. I don't understand what you're asking me. And desperately trying to communicate again and again and again. And then furthermore, when I'm looking at people at the top levels, and these are like really well trained horses, and I see these horses who have these extremely harsh equipment setups on them, I see a horse that has been desperately trying to communicate and is getting shut down again and again and again. First by the rider's aids and the training and their living situation, but now by the equipment. They have this gag bit, they have a flash nose band to keep their mouth shut, and they have a martingale. So the gag bit asks them to lift their head by pulling up at the lips, but then it's pushing down on their pole. And then when they lift their head up, they're also getting pulled on by the martingale. And then when their mouth hurts, they can't open their mouth because they now have a flash nose band on. So I see a horse that is suppressed in every means of communication. And the saddest thing with a lot of these horses at the top level is in their riding, they're suppressed in their communication because of the equipment and the rider. But then a lot of these horses leave the competition ring just to go back to a stall and live by themselves and just never get to interact with other horses, never get to live a fulfilling life. And that is horrifically devastating to think of. And I have empathy for those horses regardless, but I think about the fact that like if Milo or any of my horses were put in that situation, they would be really difficult to handle. I could make Banksy a complete monster by stabling him and just not allowing him interact with other horses. He would be terrible because he'd be so frustrated and he'd be communicating. He'd be like, why aren't you listening to me? Because when we had to stall rest him last year, he got much more difficult, and it was stall rest with like a small paddock, so it wasn't even that bad, and he had a shared fence line and a lowered fence wall, but he still got very frustrated and had behaviors that for him were abnormal, and they were the direct result of stress. So he could be a horrifically terrible horse. Yeah, Lint is here to chill. He's just the sweetest guy. He could be a horrifically terrible horse, and I could literally make him into the type of horse that people would then go on to justify, like, this horse needs a gag bit. But this is also a horse that I can ride bitless on trails, on roads, anywhere. Like, I've never ridden him in a bit. I've trail ridden him without a bridle. I've had him loose, just following. I've set him free on the beach without any equipment, right? So this is a horse that listens really well and is really engaged in training and will do what you ask, provided you're respecting him and his well-being and he has his needs met. But he's a horse that for sure someone could justify putting on really rough equipment if they put him in the situation. So the point that I'm making is that these horses are a product of their environment. Like these horses that need harsh equipment are a product of their environment. And the only hidden agenda that's not hidden, because I'm really upfront about this, that I have is that I feel bad for these horses. I feel worse for the horses to the point where I am willing to make myself uncomfortable by talking about these things and trying to be a voice for the horse. Because if I can make one horse's life better, if I can make one horse's life more bearable, that's worth it. Because as far as I'm concerned, anyone who's annoyed by what I say online can block me and never have to see my shit again. It's so easy to avoid. Their horses can't just block them out of their lives. They can't just block being stable. They can't just block rough equipment. They have no out. So the fact that so many of these people that are putting these horses in these really harsh setups and really unfulfilling lifestyles can't even handle the discomfort of someone saying a critical comment about the equipment or training methods that they use. They can't even handle a stranger saying that online. Speaks volumes because they're willing to put their horses in immense discomfort. And not only that, they don't meet the horse's species specific needs. And then when the horse reacts poorly because of that, they're also mad at the horse. So the horse's needs aren't met, they're chronically stressed, but then also people expect them to cope with all of these things without ever reacting, without ever responding. And it's just like insane. How many people do you know that you could just go stick in a bathroom and not let out of the bathroom other than you let them out of the bathroom to go run on a treadmill, but you're the one controlling the speed of what they do. They have no say over how fast they go or what they get to do. And other than that, their only real interaction and enrichment is being fed. How many people would cope with that? Because I would be a nasty ass bitch if someone kept me in that situation. And it wouldn't be because I'm just a bitchy person and that's my personality, which I mean some people who don't like me listening to this are probably like, yeah, it is. That's so true. But if I became really nasty and like reactive because of inadequate living circumstances, that's justified. Like, or not necessarily justified, but in the sense that it's like a byproduct of the living situation. So for horses that don't have these needs met or are being made to work through pain or having their communication shut down in every circumstance, you can't expect them to handle that normally. You can't expect them to handle these stressors and not be upset about it because like people can't even handle fucking sitting in traffic after work without getting pissed off. They can't even handle sitting in a lineup at the grocery store without looking at their phone and seeking enrichment. And then these same people expect their horse to just stare at a wall for 18 hours a day and then not be reactive when they leave that stall. Because also keep in mind that horses are herd animals that are meant to cover lots of ground. So when they're not able to do that, they have an abundance of energy that they've not been able to offload. So they're going to be seeking ways to offload that energy when they exit the stable. And there's studies on this. You don't have to just take my word for it. Stalling excessively increases reactivity. It also increases a lot of health issues and whatnot. So anyways, my hidden agenda is that I just care about horses. And I think that there's a lot of stuff that's justified for the convenience of the humans and for the benefit of people and at the expense of the horse. And it's all laziness because I also believe in a lot of these top level riders more than they believe in themselves, I think, because I think that if it came down to it and the rules changed, they would freaking figure out how to get the job done with less equipment if they weren't emboldened and using really harsh equipment. They would figure out how to continue in the sport if it mattered that much to them and if they had to consider the horse more. Oh, thank you. This shirt's from my store if anyone's interested in it. It says we are all nature's children. I don't think you can read it on the camera because it's small. But like people would figure it out if the rules changed. And also like I just think that there's no real ethical argument to allow these really harsh pieces of equipment in the competition ring. Because ultimately, especially at the top levels, if these riders are the best of the best, that should also involve training. If you cannot train a horse without using incredibly harsh equipment, why are you the best of the best? Also, logically, and like this might just be the freaking autism in me where I look into patterns and I see what people's behavior and their actions and not being in alignment. Logically, if you want to maintain this perspective of this beautiful horse rider partnership and the bond and these horses love their jobs, you don't need to, if someone loves their job, you don't need to coerce them by basically holding them at knife point. Because some of the equipment setups we're seeing in competition are so harsh that that's basically the equivalent. Like you're coercing someone under duress to do something. If they legitimately loved their job, you wouldn't need that. And I know a lot of people would argue that and be like, oh no, they love their job so much that they charge at fences. That's anticipatory stress. That's anticipatory stress. Notice how many of those horses, once they're done their round, they calm down and they'll walk out of the arena. And some don't because they're just truly that stressed. But a lot of horses, you can walk out on a relatively loose rein and they'll settle down. Their stress is entering the arena and being asked to perform. And then once they get to leave, it's like a relief. Like I would bet money that if you stood outside the exit of a competition ring of these horses that are highly stressed and you filmed their behavior, I bet there would be a ton of calming and displacement signals once they exit the arena and start heading back and have the rider get off. And the reason for that is because the source of their stress is entering that show ring, being asked to do what they're doing, and also the rider being present on their back. And that doesn't mean all riding has to result in that, but ultimately, if you're using really uncomfortable equipment, your horse isn't a willing participant in that job because a willing participant doesn't need to be forced with really harsh equipment. And I think like I've been getting to the bottom lately of why I find so much of the behavior in the horse world so triggering and why it's like coming to a boiling point for me where I'm just like so done with it. And like I just have no interest in like even playing the game because for years, like I still have people who are involved in the industry and who are involved in competition and who probably have different belief systems than me. And in the past, I cared more about their perspectives to the point where I'd kind of like sanitize and soften what I'm saying. But at this point, I just really don't. And like people that like me as a person can get over at like any disagreements that they have with what I say. But there's a lot of actions and justifications in the horse world that are like really closely resemble abusive communication in a relationship, which is why like I did a video recently talking about how the horse world's in an abusive relationship, which I fully believe it is. So like an example of this is watch the comment section on anything that criticizes the upper class, the top of the sport, the elitist level riders. It's always, you suck, you're not a good trainer, you're a nobody, you're just jealous. Well, it's all personal attacks and attempts to degrade you into silence. They're literally using the same type of training mechanisms that they use on horses to try to force people into compliance. And then there's the same thing where they'll use logical fallacies to try to misconstrue people's points to have an argument to attack. So another great example is, oh, you just hate all horse sports. You just want all horse sports banned. I have literally never said that. The closest I've come to saying that is that if horse sports refuse to change and better their ethics, they deserve to be banned. And I stand by that because we don't need to enable bad behavior. And ultimately, anyone who loves the horse more than the sport should be able to look around and go, if it's between condoning abuse at the pinnacle of the sport and doing nothing about it and the sport ending, it's in the horse's best interest for the sport to end. Another manipulation tactic I've seen used is that, oh, if horses are used in sport, they'll go extinct. So like some stuff, like I literally got a comment today that's like some suffering is okay, like the occasional injury or bloody mouth is okay because otherwise they're gonna go extinct. First of all, if we phased out horse competition and people stopped wanting to have horses and they eventually became obsolete, who the fuck cares? Because that just means that people don't want them unless they can exploit them. And unless you do a sudden and complete ban with no phase out, the horses would just eventually pass away and then there wouldn't be new generations. So it would be a slow shift. And like, secondly, why is it that people are looking at suffering, like lifelong suffering, as a bigger kindness than just not existing in the first place, or not living in the first place? So it's just really it's upsetting. And then also I think the thing that pisses me off too is that like a lot of people are more angry about people pointing out problems in the horse industry and commenting on the lack of ethics than they are about people engaging in those problematic practices. Like a lot of people are more mad at me being like, hey, like that is like with the bit setup that I posted recently, that is a poorly fitted hackamore, it's right on the end of the nose. A lot of people are more pissed off about hearing that than they are about the fact that that was let into the arena. Because realistically, like, even for the rider's well-being, so that she wouldn't have to deal with the amount of scrutiny that she's getting online, all it would have taken is for a steward to stop her and be like, your hackamore is too low. You need to put it up a few holes. If you can't on this bridle, go run and get a different bridle. We'll change the order of go slightly or whatever. That's all it would have taken. And still, that setup sucks regardless, even when it's properly fitted. But the fit was the biggest issue with that. So literally all it would have taken is for someone to just step in and freaking fix it. But like even that's too much. And the craziest thing to me is that like fitting equipment so that it's not extremely damaging, especially when you're opting to use harsher equipment, should be the bare minimum. But apparently even that is too much to ask for. And like I just can't stand watching it. There's all these people who claim that it's about the love of the horse, but then every single action that they exemplify shows that the sport's the priority because it's too much of an inconvenience to them to stop and consider the horse for a second. And a lot of people feel like basic consideration of the horse is extreme because the horse world is so far behind changing anything, because the horse world hasn't made any adjustments. So it feels extreme to make adjustments because we haven't changed. Like we're really far behind. So we have to do a lot more catch up than what you might expect for a different industry that has been actually moving with the ethics and is not existing centuries behind. Um, so, and then I've also lately been making the whole connection between like classism and elitism and capitalism and like how that creates evils in the horse world. So it's just gotten me all riled up because I hate all that shit outside of the horse world, but it's also the same type of evil that's making the horse world, um, like horse world bad. I have a question. Is the use of those little crisscross emotes, tie-down things bad? I forgot the name. Do you mean like the figure eight noseband, or you're not gonna have my coffee, dude? If you mean like a figure eight noseband, I think I know what you're. Yeah, like for me, I would have vehemently denied this. If you went and go look at old videos, you'll probably find something where I'm like, oh no, blah blah blah, that's fine. I think anything that is with the purpose of trying to restrict movement of the mouth is a shitty thing to do if you're gonna put something in their mouth. because already you're like obstructing their natural comfort by putting an object in their mouth and like having it be invasive because they don't get to control the pressure. So at the bare minimum, you should be giving them the opportunity to be able to open their mouth to relieve pressure if you're going to do that. And I don't really think there's any real justification for that that's actually for the best interest of the horse. The one that I see people try to do is that if I don't do this, my horse is going to be out of control and will go crashing through a fence. And it's like, okay, well then don't jump them. Don't jump them until you can control them without causing them pain. And like I also think that like if you look at the studies on bits, because there's been more that have come out more recent years, the number of horses that they're finding that have oral lesions from bits, it's like there was one study that surveyed like 200 horses, and 52% of them had lesions, and the majority of those lesions were acute lesions. So that trend alone is a huge sign that we need to be doing more research to reflect on whether or not bits are ethical, and that organizations like the FEI should be participating directly in that because they have a sample size that could be easily tested. And realistically, all it would take is just having a vet from a third party not involved with the FEI checking mouths and like documenting and taking images and getting different people to look at it. So like that's all it would really take. But you want to know why they're not going to do that? Because it would be damning to the sport. Because the findings would prove that it's a very big problem if they actually looked further into it. Like even that skull behind me, sorry, this is mirrored, so it looks like I'm pointing the wrong way. That skull behind me, there's bone remodeling on the bars of the mouth, presumably from a bit, because I don't really know what else would cause that, and it's exactly where a bit would sit. So it also begs the question, how many horses, if you were to look at them post-mortem, would have signs of bone remodeling from bits, or also bone remodeling along the face from tightly fitted nosebands, because that's another thing that has been discovered. Oh, acutes, like the severe lesions. They had like a different grading system. So they had like acute lesions, they had like moderate, and then mild, and then there was horses without lesions. But the point was that like 48% of the horses did not have lesions, and it shouldn't be a situation where it's like less of the horses don't have visible damage to their mouths than the ones that do. And like that's one study, and I agree that there needs to be more sample sizes. There needs to be more study on this, but like that finding alone, especially on a study with 200 horses, that is really concerning. And the fact that more horse people aren't like, oh yeah, we should look further into this because what if this is more of a problem than we think, speaks volumes. Because the reason why they don't want to do that is because it ultimately comes down to the fact that they don't want to change their practices. They don't want to be put in a position where they cannot justify doing things the way that they've been doing because it requires more work on their end. And that's really what it comes down to, because there would be more openness to information if people were actually open to the idea of changing. But the fact of the matter is a lot of horse people aren't even open to considering changing their practices. They don't even want to consider a different way of doing things because it would uproot their life too much, and it would change their goals because they would have to make alterations to their timeline and their equipment. And I say that from a place of experience because a lot of my denial stemmed from the fact that it's like, okay, if I accept this might be true, then it means that I have to change my behavior. And when you're not ready to do that, you make excuses. And that's what we're seeing a huge portion of the horse world make, because again, like the studies on bits are really concerning. Like they show trends that need a further look. And the fact that none of these big competition organizations want to look further at these things is a concern, because it would improve the ethics of the sport. And like, honestly, what is there really to lose to just have more information on things? What's there to lose? It would just help improve the sport. And also horses will probably be safer to handle if they aren't in pain. The other thing too is that the vast majority of these people who need harsh equipment or harsh handling of horses, I would bet money on the fact that their horses are stable for longer than they are like actually outside in any degree of what you could consider turnout. So that right there is if those horses had adequate living situations, then they wouldn't be as difficult to handle and you wouldn't need to justify shitty equipment. So then the question is, why are people more comfortable selecting harsh equipment to ride their horse and make them do something than they are providing species appropriate needs? Because the first things you should be doing are addressing what makes the behavior most likely to occur. and lack of turnout and lack of stimulation is really high on that list. And a lot of people aren't doing that. Plus, there's also this assumption from like the general population of horse people that everyone at the upper levels is just always doing what's right for their horse simply because they compete at a high level. And it's like, the only thing that I can have to say why people think that is like, it's classism. It's this idea that once you get into this elite group of people that you're an expert and that you're untouchable, when in reality, it's like the more status, privilege, and money is involved in something, the more incentive there is for people to be corrupted. A lot of the most generous people that I have met are the people who have the least. So like this idea that people who have more money are automatically more ethical just is not founded. And this isn't an attack on all rich people. It's just simply saying like the richest people in the world are some of the shittiest people in the world. And no one listening to this should ever feel attacked for that because none of you are fucking billionaires. None. And $1 billion is such a disgusting amount of money that it's like the fact that Elon Musk is going to be a trillionaire, like that's fucking insane. And I cannot believe how many everyday people who will never even see a shred of that amount of money in their lifetimes, in multiple lifetimes, defend that shit. Because this idea that people are more entitled to being greedy and chasing things that do not matter and just having so much money, status, or like in the horse world, it's chasing wins, chasing gold medals. The fact that people think that they're more entitled to doing those things or justifying those things than actually treating other beings with kindness or doing things that actually benefit the community is insane. And yeah, that's why I'm never gonna be freaking billionaire, because you have to freaking corrupt yourself to be really rich. And it's the same thing with like the top levels. You have to corrupt yourself to a degree to be really rich, which is like, did anyone see any of these top level riders speak out about the FEI blood rule? Because I sure as shit didn't. And you would think that people who are paying the most money to participate would speak out against those things if they are against them. And maybe they did privately, but it also begs the question of why are none of these top level riders ever speaking out about ethics in any meaningful public way? Because they don't want to alienate themselves from their peers. Even the people who don't agree with the blood rule, they're not going to fucking say anything because they don't want to get alienated and isolated from their peers. And they're probably also afraid of retaliation. So in order to be at that level, you do have to sell out to a certain degree, because if you don't, you're going to have a target on your back and you're going to be very, very uncomfortable existing in that crowd because you're going to be the odd one out. So that's the other thing, is like these top level riders should be advocating for more ethics, but like none of them are. And it's just like so frustrating. And like I just cannot stand how the industry is going. And I cannot stand like the world as a whole, how it's going. Like the amount of people that are just vehemently defending greed and just like shitty behavior that's going to lead to the demise of the world. Yeah. But with the horse industry in particular, it just needs a complete overhaul, because if we're actually going to be honest too, it's just you can't really defend the ethics of taking a herd animal and flying them around the world and having them predominantly live in a stall just so you can go on a competition tour. Like I think in reality, the better decision would be to have like set facilities in certain areas that they can go to in their closest areas and then compete there and like be judged there, and then just collectively do the scores, or do it like digitally or something. Because it's just not ethical to fly them around like that. Like it's not in the horse's best interest. There's no way around that. But yeah, the whole thing is just really frustrating, and a lot of it just comes down to money. And like the other hill that I'm going to die on is like, honestly, there's this superiority complex that a lot of people at the top levels have, where it's like, oh, well, let's see you jump a meter 40. Let's see you go compete Grand Prix. And it's like, first of all, there's a lot of people who could do that if you would just send them like $20,000 so that they could afford to like pay the entry fees and also get like the lessons and whatnot to be there, because like there's no way around the fact that finances are a huge detractant from competing. So that it also comes back to elitism there. But there's this belief system that people who cannot compete at that level are inherently less good at training and riding, when if you look at those riders, a lot of them are getting horses that are already developed to a certain level and they're just riding them. Like, they're not training their own horses usually. They don't start their own horses. They don't train out problem behaviors. So yeah, no shit, they just need to put on rough equipment because they're not the ones training. So the superiority complex of like, oh, let's see you jump a meter 40. Let's fucking see one of those Grand Prix riders take their Grand Prix horse on a trail ride bridleless. Let's see them literally do anything. Let's see them jump a course in a snaffle. If they're the superior trainer, bit your horse down and go compete Grand Prix in a snaffle instead of the gag bit that you usually ride in. And like the superiority complex stems from this idea that these people are superior at everything, when it's like, okay, they might be able to jump around a bigger course than some people, but they still can't train their horse how to be relaxed enough to not need a razor blade in its mouth to go around the course. And also, again, like none of these riders are training their own horses. None of the best riders, if you look at the leaderboards, all these riders are tending to get horses that are already started and made when they get them. So the foundational stuff, like getting a horse relaxed to the point where they can school in a snaffle or something, they're not doing that shit. They're just getting on and going. And also, if you look at horses who are bought and sold by other riders, there's some horses who, with their first rider that they've had on them, they'll be going in like a snaffle or a hackamore. And then they get sold to someone else, and now suddenly they're in a combination bit or a gag bit. And that is a skill issue. It's not that the horse suddenly became more difficult to ride. And if they did, then there's probably something going on in the training or the management of the horse that caused that. But like the equipment you use is a skill issue. And the fact that I am not willing to go compete amongst a group of people who constantly condescend anyone who doesn't support them, which is like major abuser energy, by the way, because like if you've ever been in an abusive relationship, the second you criticize their behavior or say, hey, you hurt me, or hey, your behavior here is harmful, the first thing that they do is attack you and deny, and just deflect away from the problem. Their favorite thing to do. And a lot of horse people follow the same playbook that we see from abusers in human relationships. And I usually am cautious to use the word abuse because it riles people up so much, but I've started to notice that there's this problem that we have in society where people have this idea that in order to actually be an abuser, you need to be acting with actual malice and with the idea that you want to cause harm, when really, like, I don't know if you could find, like, the vast majority of abusers that you will find do not think that they're being abusive. They have excuses for their behavior. They'll make up reasons, and sometimes they will feel really bad and they'll go into damage control and they'll be super nice for a while before they resort back to their abusive behavior. So, so there is oftentimes some underlying guilt about how they behave. And they're in massive denial because they don't want to be vulnerable and take accountability because they're worried about what it says about them. So instead of doing that, they defend themselves, they deny, and they continue doing what they're doing. But the vast majority of people will not call themselves an abuser. So this idea that in order to be an abuser, you need to be like a movie villain level evil is just not true. And I think that it leads people to not being able to identify abuse. Like they don't identify abuse properly and they justify it. And I know that it harmed me for sure because I wasn't able to notice trends of behavior um to like get out of situations early before the major red flags start coming through. But abuse towards horses in the industry is normalized, but we also see abuse towards people. Like a lot of the tactics that are used to get people to stop questioning things and support what they see are emotional abuse tactics. Um, and I think that's probably why I find the whole situation with the horse world so incredibly triggering, because I notice these things. And I think that's also why a lot of people get so defensive, because they don't want to be an abuser, but also they don't want to be self-reflective and hold themselves accountable. And if you're not willing to do that, you run the risk of being harmful. And really, like, if you look up the definition of what abuse is, there's no point of that requires deliberate malice or like a desire to actually inflict pain. And like a lot of horse people don't actually want to do that in practice, but then they just perpetually justify their behavior and never self-reflect. And there's always a reason and an excuse for everything, which makes it easier for things to escalate. And even some of the worst abusers, like the scandals that we've seen within the last year, like that Australian dressage rider whipping his horse like 20 or I think it was 40 plus times. That guy did not start out that rough. It would start out with smaller things, justifying them over the course of time, having people around you justify them, and then having it build to the point where now you're enabling shit that if you had seen it happen at the start of your career, you would have identified it as abuse. So that's the other thing is a lot of people are growing up learning about horses in circles that are normalizing harmful and abusive behavior. And then they get in so deep that by the time they're doing really abusive things, they're not even clocking it as being that. Um, and it's just this idea that people like a lot of the equipment that people are able to legally sell and that companies are able to legally sell is not ethical. Like especially for like show jumping bits and also like barrel racing is a pretty bad offender for that. And that issue also comes back to capitalism because it's really lucrative to just offer people a quick and immediate fix. If I sold bridles that offered restrictive mouthpieces and made it easier for people to force their horses into submission, I would probably sell a lot of them. And if I promised people quick fixes with things, I'd probably sell a lot of them. As a trainer, I know I would get more business if I was willing to just do band-aid fixes and suppress behaviors and give people the easiest, quickest path to their desired destination without caring about how it impacts the horse. I would make way more money. If I didn't care about the horse's emotional well-being, I could do these before and afters where you really stress a horse out by flooding them and you get these big explosive behaviors and then you gradually work them to the point of fatigue and then you get the really phenomenal before and after where they're acting crazy and then the after they're really looking calm. But the problem with like doing things in a more ethical way means that you're trying to never trigger that level of flight response, ideally. So you don't usually get those types of captures in training when you're filming it, and it can make it look like the horse is never a problem. So unless the client films the horse freaking out before you ever get it, you don't often get those impressive before and afters that people see and that they're so wowed by. Because ultimately that's what people are after. They care more about things being interesting to watch and impressive to watch than they do about horse welfare. Because like honestly, like if it's not possible for people to jump a meter 60 without using incredibly harsh equipment, then do we really need to be jumping them that high? And that should be like you would think that that should just be a nice normal statement and not controversial, but it is super controversial because people do not want to change. They don't want to reflect on how they impact anyone or anything. And just speaking from experience, like there's like I think that if there was a deep dive into the horse industry, even just looking at humans that are abused, it would be disgusting how much abuse is normalized. How many trainers are super abusive to their students or their employees. Because also even just speaking from experience and like knowing people who've done working student positions, the vast majority of working student positions are really abusive. They're exploiting people who desperately just want a chance. And like a lot of these working student positions are reliant on promising someone who's underprivileged access to the top level of sport, which they desperately want. But then in practice, they're being worked to the bone and they're not getting fairly compensated. A ton of working student positions are like that. And they're reliant on painting this picture of getting your into this highly expensive, exclusive industry if you just work for them. And so many people are able to take advantage of these young, passionate horse people who just want to be part of the industry in doing that. And it's normal because then they do the freaking pull up your bootstraps mentality to justify that. Be like, oh well, if you can't make it to the top, you obviously didn't work hard enough. Because if you work really hard, you'll get there. Bullshit. Bullshit. I've worked hard my whole fucking life, and the cost of living has gone up so much that if it had gone up at a regular level instead of skyrocketing, I would be doing really well right now. And I would have everything I want. I'd probably already have my own farm. But that's not the case. Hard work doesn't give you the funds and the capacity to compete in an industry that's inherently elitist and that has so many obstacles in place to prevent people who do not come from lucrative financial backgrounds from making it. And that's just a fact. Like, people love tokenizing the few people who come from humble beginnings, and manage to make it to the top with very little money. People love tokenizing those riders and being like, well, see, anyone can do this. Okay, well, then why aren't there more of them? If anyone can do that, why aren't there more of them? Because this idea that these poor people just are inherently less talented and less hardworking is such a fucking load of shit. All of the hardest workers, the hardest working students, and all these people who are literally grinding themselves to the bone just to have a chance at being in the industry are people that are coming from less money, because the ones that have lots of money use that money to be able to spend their time, instead of working and mucking stalls, they get to spend it on lessons and going to school and going to competitions. All of the people that I know personally, and obviously this is anecdotal, but just as a sweeping view, talking to lots of people and just seeing, a lot of the people who are competing the most on the rated circuit and who are able to climb the levels in the way to get to the top, they have such privilege that they have grown up, generally speaking, from a place where they don't pay for their car insurance, they don't pay for their gas, they don't pay rent, all their show fees are covered. And if they do go to post-secondary, it's covered, or at the bare minimum, even if they're paying their post-secondary, their show fees are covered. Because for a lot of people who don't have lots of money, you get to choose between, do I want to spend my money setting up my long-term career and going to school or doing what I need to do, or do I want to spend it to go to competitions that I will not make any money at? Because also in the English show world, it's like you don't even have the chance of making any meaningful money until you're at the top levels, because there's no money to be won. And the show fees are so high that, like, even any money you do win, you're very unlikely to even break even. So it's not a sustainable sport to be in if you're actually hoping to get money out of it. And the elitism just really jumps out at me, because like, the interesting thing from my perspective is that when I started out riding and showing when I was younger, my parents could afford to pay for all that, and I got regular lessons, and I got like a horse spot for me, and I had all the bells and whistles. And anyone who tries to say that they're working just as hard as someone who has to pay for all that themselves is lying, because you have way more time to do lessons and also way more energy when you're not working that hard. And like, the interesting thing too for me is that a lot of the people who criticize my work the most and who have the biggest issue with any commentary on welfare, they'll go, well, like, oh, let's see you get to the level, let's see you ride, blah, 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 blah. Sorry, I'm too busy fucking actually caring for my horses and having them actually live outside. They're out on a track system, which means I have to walk like 3 kilometers just to pick their fucking shit up. And I would rather spend time doing that than have them be somewhere where they don't have that, but I might be more inclined to compete. And also, it's not just about riding. Like, why do you need to see someone ride to reflect on the ethics of what you're doing? Like, if someone was like, hey, maybe you shouldn't hit your dog to discourage a behavior, and then you're like, oh, well, let's see you walk your dog, or like get your dog to do XYZ tricks. It's like, why do you need to see someone why does someone need to jump through hoops for you to consider why your behavior might be harmful? Like, it literally doesn't make any sense. But okay. Yeah. Oh, we're barking. What, Phoebe? Phoebe, come here. She's like, I think someone's here. I don't think anyone's here. I know, you're fine. You're fine. Yeah, like any punisher is like a behavioral suppressant. So like, that's the other thing that I think a lot of horse, like, the other thing too is that these people who are like, let's see you compete at the top levels, my question to most of these people is, let's see you actually describe the function of your training and how it works and is applied to the horse. What quadrants of operant conditioning are you working with? How does it impact the horse? How is it affecting behavioral change? The vast majority of trainers that you ask this are not going to be able to do that, because they don't know the function of how they're training. They just do it and they're like, oh, it works, and they'll deny it. Because I've had people argue with me about how what they're doing is not punishment, and I'm like, well, is it the purpose to deter a behavior? Yes. Okay, are you adding a stimulus or are you removing one? Oh, you're adding one? That's positive punishment, and you're suppressing behavior by doing an unpleasant stimulus to try to deter them from doing it. Or they'll be like, I don't use negative reinforcement, I use pressure and release. And it's like, pressure and release is negative reinforcement. Like, there's such a gap on understanding of basic behavioral things that any professional should be able to easily easily rattle off before they should be charging any professional services. But there's such a huge gap that these people cannot explain what they're talking about. And it's okay for the everyday layperson to not be able to do that. But any professional needs to be able to say the function of how they're training and actually understand behavioral science. And for people that claim that horse training isn't a science, again, they're full of shit. It's a very silly thing to say because science is literally just the study of the natural world. Training is modifying behavior. That is behavioral science. So in order to actually understand the function of what you're doing and how it works, you need to have a grasp on behavioral science. You don't need to use all the specific scientific terms if you don't want to, but you should be able to have enough of a grasp that you can explain the cause and effect of what you're doing. And a lot of people can't do that, and that's the bare minimum. And a lot of these training programs that people go through to become a coach, to coach upper level riders, or to basically engage in the show world in any capacity, if you look at the programs, there's very, very little emphasis on anything pertaining to horse behavior and anything pertaining to behavioral science and operant conditioning and learning theory. It's all about how can you get this rider to ride. So that's ultimately why I didn't end up going through those programs and why I went the route of IAABC, because it's actually emphasizing understanding the behavior of the animal. And while teaching people is important, I think the other thing that needs, like the horse is the other part of the equation. So sure, you need to be able to explain things well to people, but you also need to be able to understand the horse's behavior, ethics, and welfare, and how the stuff that you're doing functions and works. The same applies to a lot of the equipment people use. They can't actually speak for how it works. They can't, and there's people love to gaslight in other people into believing that soft hands cancel out the mechanics of equipment. Once you start to use harsh equipment, you have chosen not to have soft hands. Soft hands don't even want to have the likelihood of mistakenly adding too much pressure or creating a problem for the horse. Soft hands don't want to use aggressive equipment because the entire point of aggressive equipment is to amplify the effect of your hands. So while your hands might feel soft because you're applying less pressure than what you might in a snaffle or a side pull, your hand pressure is being amplified. So again, it's the choice not to be soft. And I hate that excuse because it just basically lets everyone off the hook. And then the other excuse that people really love to say is that like they love to say, oh, if the horse didn't want to, they wouldn't. And I hate that one because it's a tactic to justify anything that you do, because if you can make the horse do it, clearly they wanted to. Pardon? Do you not recall that we rode these animals into war? You're gonna look me in the eye and tell me that horses wanted to run into gunfire. You're gonna look me in the eye and tell me that flight animals wanted to do that? No. It's very easy to make horses do things that they don't want to do. Also, not to mention, we've done it with like much larger animals that are more unpredictable and less domesticated than horses. Very few horse people would probably argue that the training of elephants in zoos was ethical, because they would like cattle prod them and they had like spike collars on their legs to prevent them from running away. And those are big animals. And yet we are still able to force them to perform and do things. There's so many examples of people being able to make animals perform and do things even when they probably don't want to. Also, it's ironic because a lot of the people who say that, it's like, oh, you can't let your horse get away with that. Get away with what? What are they trying to do? They're trying to defy your orders. Oh, look, that's them telling you they don't want to do something. But when they do that, you get after them and you punish them and you make them do it anyways. And so much training is rooted in that. So there's a lot, if you just listen to what horse people say and what their actions say, there's a lot of direct contradictions where they'll say one thing with their words and then they'll completely do the opposite, because people know deep down that their horses don't always want to do things, because there's whole schools of training that are about being the boss, not letting your horse be disrespectful and not letting them get away with bad behavior. And ultimately, if they wanted to do what you're asking them to do all the time, they're not going to behave badly. But yeah, and like what Pariah Mouse said is just us being on their backs is completely unnatural to them as a prey animal. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the other thing, is that people need to have more appreciation Because the other thing too is like asking a horse to get into a trailer is like one of the most unnatural and scary things we ask them to do. Stuff like that, we should be really appreciative of when they do that. We should just be appreciative of the fact that they're nice to us after like all the demands that humanity has had of them. And we largely aren't. Like, there's no way that people can pay off the debt that we owe to horses, because we've just taken and exploited them for so much. And the only way we can even start to pay it back is by being more considerate of them now, because at least in the past, we relied on them more because we didn't have machinery. So there was more of an excuse to push them to do things out of necessity. And nowadays it's like they're all used for recreation and sport. There's no need to do things in a really unethical way. And the fact that it's like so controversial to say things like, let's be more critical of the equipment we use. Let's be kinder in our training methods. Let's reflect on why horses are behaving a certain way and consider the fact that a lot of behaviors stem from anxiety or pain. The fact that stuff like that's controversial is really, really sad. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to scare you, little guy. It's like I was just about to close my eyes and sleep. But yeah, like there's too many things that are controversial that really, really shouldn't be. So I'm so exhausted with the horse world, and oh my god, he's so cute, isn't he? Isn't he just awesome? Also, like with stuff like this, with like this little guy, um, he is the result. Like I've had weird comments about him because I was talking about spaying and neutering animals because of how he suffered before we rescued him, and I got a comment that's like, "Oh well, if his parents were spayed and neutered, he wouldn't exist. So why would you want that?" And I was like, "Dude, he shouldn't have existed. Like I love him and I'm glad he's here, but he shouldn't have had to suffer like he did. And if he never existed, it's not like he's going to be sad because he very well could have died. If I hadn't caught him, he would have died." So it's just really interesting to me because a lot of those perspectives come down to selfishness. Because like a cat like him shouldn't have existed. Kittens shouldn't be getting born into situations where they cannot be cared for. Because most of the time, there's not going to be someone who finds them and rescues them. There's a lot of animals on the streets that just end up dying. And like, unfortunately, I think his siblings are probably dead unless someone stepped in and captured them. Because I don't like if they were anywhere near as unhealthy as him, they're not with us anymore unless someone got them. And it's really sad because his mom was like really young too, but that's again people just being irresponsible. And the fact that calling stuff like that out is met with the response of, "Oh well, you can't really say that because you have this cat now and you're happy that he's here." And it's like, yeah, I'm happy that he's here, but that doesn't mean that he should have existed. His parents should have been spayed and neutered. They shouldn't just be roaming free and like breeding incessantly. There's so many cats and kittens in shelters all the time because of people like that. And yeah, like there's not gonna ever be any means of like fully capturing just how unhealthy he was because people had to like physically touch him to feel how thin he was. Um, the 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 videos couldn't capture how skinny he was. So there's not really any means to capture the full state of neglect because of how much his coat hid it, but it was really disgusting. And like I think that anyone that is able to see an animal like that hopefully will stop defending the idea that we should just be breeding more cats and kittens. Especially since we just mostly have them as pets. And like even with dogs, it's like if you're gonna buy a dog from a breeder, make sure it's a responsible breeder because there's a lot of people who just get a dog and then they want to keep it intact because they want to make money off of the puppies and it's not a well-bred dog. And it's just adding more unwanted animals or potentially unwanted animals or animals with health issues into an already flooded system. And it's just not super fair to them. So yeah, it's frustrating because I also feel really bad for vets and like shelter workers and whatnot for like what they have to deal with because there's just so many animals that are needing homes. And then we see people that are like attacking veterinarians and shelter workers that are going and like getting attacked for having to euthanize animals when they're overflowed, and people will go, oh, that's so horrible, but it's like, no, you're looking at like the solution to an overpopulation problem that wasn't caused by the people who are now put in the position of having to deal with it and manage it. But yeah, so anyways, none of my cats are outdoor cats. He's gonna get leash trained eventually. He's just really small right now, so he's not gonna fit any harness right now. And he's also probably gonna be quite scared of being outside, I think. Because he doesn't even really go out on the catio yet. But yeah. Cats, like here, we have so many coyotes. We have predatory birds like eagles and hawks, and then obviously cars. But the other thing with like outdoor cats is that they have like caused numerous bird species to go into extinction because they're really good predators and they're technically an invasive species. So like that's an aspect that I think should also be considered when we're talking about outdoor cats because they're really negatively impactful to the environment. And like I know a lot of people who have barn cats, and like depending on how big your property is, they tend to stay more on the property and like not wander as far. Like I think suburban cats are probably the most at risk of getting hit by a car or something. But they like they're just like they're really good predators. Like the barn cats we have here, like that my landlord has, they kill things all the time, and not often the things that they're supposed to. So I do understand like for mouse control, because if like rats and mice see cats, they tend to stay further away. But yeah, like honestly, my dog is a better ratter than my cats typically are. They have caught mice in the house the few times that they get in, but like my dog is more adept at being like accurate with that and doing it humanely because cats play with their food too much. But yeah, like the bird thing is like the biggest concern. But yeah, for me, none of my cats will go outside just because there's too many variables, unless they're on a leash. And even with leash training them, like I really want to take them on hikes and stuff, but I eventually need to get like further out of any type of busy area because the thing I would be most afraid of on hikes is not like wildlife, it's people and their shitty off leash dogs. And like I would bear spray someone's dog if it tried to come at me with my cats. So is already like off leash dogs are a pretty major problem and it's really annoying. Like I don't mind if people let their dogs off leash if they have good recall and that they call them off. But I find it really frustrating when people have this assumption that everyone and every dog wants to interact with their dog. And even when they're leashed, like if they let their dog just come over to you, it's like, what are you doing? Why are you assuming that we want to interact with you? Because usually I put my dog into like a heel right beside me and I move her off the trail and I go between her and any dog because I just really don't trust people. And like my body language and what I'm doing with her should be enough of a hint that I don't want to interact with them. But a lot of people are just like, they just don't care, or they're just really that oblivious. They think that everyone wants to interact with their dog. And it's annoying because like my dog has dog reactivity because of irresponsible dog owners, and having been like run down and attacked. And like the other thing is like even if your dog's friendly, if they go sprinting towards a strange dog, that doesn't come across very welcoming. It doesn't come. It's not good social skills because a lot of dogs are going to feel threatened by that. But yeah, I off leash dogs are the bane of my fucking existence. But I do want to get the cats out. Like eventually, like I'm really trying to get my boyfriend on board with like building a travel van that has like AC, so that there's capacity to like have a climate controlled vehicle, so that the animals are safe in there, even if we don't take them everywhere with us when we go outside. Obviously, that's very expensive. So Lint, I hope Lint just goes viral enough that he can buy us a travel van one day, right? You've already probably paid for yourself. Queso paid for himself from the one bath video that I posted on Facebook. That was like my most viral video, and like even despite how many views it got, you really don't make that much. But he paid for his neutering and he paid for his vaccines. So shout out to Queso. So he's paid up. He does pay rent. But yeah, like my goal is to get the travel van because then if we went places, it makes it so much easier to road trip because a lot of the parks here in BC do let dogs and like animals into them, but then some don't. So if you're road tripping, it would be nice to have the capacity to like put um, your animals just in a climate controlled vehicle and have them be safe. And then it's also just kind of like their home base. Um, but I think it would be really fun to take the cats and the dog camping and like climbing and stuff. So because there's so many cool places here in BC. So honestly, that's my goal. People can say what they will about like competition being the be all end all and like the epitome of what good horsemanship is. But what I really want to do is just go camping with my animals and go riding through the mountains and have a nice time in the wilderness. Maybe jump a log or two and just have fun like that because that's really beautiful. Arena work has kind of it's I've kind of outgrown a lot of that, and I find that a lot of the horses don't really like it. Um, so I just want to get a little homestead and have my little animals and my horses and the means to like build the enrichment structures and ideas that I have, and then just chill and do behavioral rehabs for animals and also just have more space for animals. Like we're pretty good here, but it is like it definitely is very limiting to be like a renter and have like horses because a lot of the stuff that you want to put in for like livestock to make their setup better is really expensive and a lot of it involves permanent structures. So that's something that I found really frustrating. Yes to more trail riding vlogs, just probably not until the springtime because I have to get them fit again. And Banksy, like I'm posting a vlog I think on Friday. Members can see it early, so if you're subscribed, you can see it. But Banksy blew like a huge abscess back in July. Like he had two abscesses and one blew out his coronet band, so there was like a crack in the hoof and it's growing down the toe. And it's probably going to be at the bottom of the toe within his next trim cycle. And then once it hits the bottom, it's going to crack his foot, and he's probably going to be pretty sore, or like too sore to ride for a little bit until it grows out. Even like with a hoof boot, I just wouldn't bother. So right now, I've just been like packing it with like hoof wax, which I'm also going to be doing like a holiday gift guide for like DIY gifts for horse people, and I'm going to show how to make the antibacterial beeswax hoof wax that I make, and then also like a hoof packing clay. So that'll probably be like the next tutorial video that I post for members or Patreon subscribers. And then yeah, training videos too. A lot of my in-depth tutorials go on Patreon, just because I do need to do some stuff to make a living, and I'm still always going to do free content. But my barn vlogs and stuff will have more of that. Like today, if it goes well with my GoPro, I'm going to be doing like a reverse round pen thing with Banksy, hopefully. And then that way I can get that on video. But yeah, the winter is kind of just hit or miss because it's so wet here. And when it's downpouring, it's like less fun to do stuff with the horses, especially when you don't have an indoor. So I usually just like out there for my chores. However, today is beautiful, so that's why I'm going to be going out there just waiting for the GoPro to charge, which it should be pretty charged now. So we're gonna head out soon. When Lint is on me, it makes it way harder to get up because he's so comfortable right now. Also, like I did post on my community page that he hadn't gained weight between his vet appointments, which were about 2 weeks apart, so it wasn't terrible. I got him like a little kitten weight gaining supplement now, and like I didn't get one before because he was putting on weight well enough that it wasn't a concern. He's definitely put on weight now, and like his coat also just looks so much healthier. And then I also got him a probiotic supplement because like I'm sure his digestive system is just completely screwed from how skinny and sick he was. So he's got that now too, and then he's going to be going back into the vet clinic for a recheck and his rabies shot in a couple weeks. So he'll be doing that, but I can feel that he's put on weight because like you can really feel like his bones and whatnot when like he's still too skinny because you can feel his ribs and his spine quite a bit. And pelvis and like hip area was where it's like the most noticeable, like so skinny when we first got him. So he also just needs to put on muscle, and he's been so active now that he's definitely doing the work to put on muscle, because he's like running around and he's jumping and he's climbing and stuff. But he just doesn't have like normal muscle tone for a kitten of his age, which makes sense because his body literally had to eat his muscle to keep him alive. So it'll take him some time to catch up. I do think he's probably going to be smaller than what he would have been if he's healthy. Like I think he'll catch up well enough to be like a relatively normal cat size, but he is still like quite a bit smaller than what he's supposed to be right now because he's probably about 16 weeks now, like 4 months. Like approximately, like obviously I don't know exactly when he was born. And he's like the size that Queso was when he was half that age. So he's quite a bit smaller than what a regular cat his age would be. But like he's doing really well. So in the beginning it was pretty scary because I was just like worried I was gonna find him no longer alive because he was so skinny. But he's just a little baby, and he likes his life. He's gotten way more outgoing and comfortable. Like I'm really looking forward to watching him and Queso play when they're more size matched, because he's like 3 pounds and Queso's 12 pounds, so it's like a very unfair size match. Queso's really gentle with him, but like when they're more evenly size matched, it's gonna be so funny because Lit is already so outgoing and playful and like really quite brave. So once he has more size behind him to really like hold his ground against Queso, I think their playtime is gonna be really funny. Because right now, like he's just so little. Like the other morning, every morning when I get up, like I start to walk towards the kitchen and like all the animals come running because they know they're gonna get fed. And when him and Queso are running together, they'll start like batting at each other and playing. And the other morning, Queso was like literally just running, and Lint was underneath of him and running underneath of him and like hitting at Queso's belly because he's that small. Like he can do that. And it was so funny. They're really funny. Like I need to get like a Furbo camera or something to film around the house when they're doing stuff because they're hilarious, and there's just so much stuff that I never get on video that they're doing because it just like happens. So I gotta do something like that, and also that would help with my anxiety when I'm not around because I could just check on them remotely like I do with the horses. But yeah, so they're hilarious, and I'm looking for. Also, like I think the most exciting thing that's going to come from cat content in the near future is once we get a Christmas tree, because obviously this guy's going to climb it. Like I would be astounded if he didn't. Um, so I think that'll be pretty funny. But we'll see. Queso's for sure gonna try to climb it too. He did a little bit last. Like Queso's already had one Christmas, and he did try to climb it a little bit last year, when he was like a baby. But it honestly wasn't as bad as what I would have expected from his personality. So, but yeah, they're pretty funny, right? Are you gonna climb the Christmas tree? You think you want my coffee so badly, but you really don't. You don't, and you can't have it. But yeah, like I think a pet camera would be life changing for anxiety because I did do that for my horses, and like when I'm actually like away, like when I was at the clinic in Nova Scotia, like I could just go look at my cameras, or if I get anxious and I'm like, what are my horses doing? I can go look at the cameras and just like see what they're doing. And like I mean, if they're not standing really close to the camera, it's not like you can get like a super good look at them, but like you can see that they're there and that like everyone's got their legs screwed on right, and stuff. So that was a huge peace of mind for me, was getting the camera. So the pet camera would kind of serve the same purpose. Because really, he's like the only one that I worry about, right? Because the other cats are fine. So he's the only one I worry about. What? What? But he's the sweetest baby. Okay, are you leaving? Okay, bye. Have fun. Big stretch. Oh, you're coming back? What are you doing? It's like, I don't know what I want to do. Bye. It's like, see you guys. I leave. Where you go? I want to make sure that he's not. Oh, you're right behind my chair. I can't move it. Yeah, he's very food motivated. He wants to eat everything, so he's definitely one that we have to watch because, like, with the dog's obviously very food motivated, and she'll try to steal food if it's left out, but at least she can't like climb and like get stuff as easily as a cat can. So having a cat that's like as food motivated as a dog is gonna be interesting because like he's so quick. He almost got Nick's sandwich the other day like while Nick was eating it. It was pretty funny. But yeah, he's pretty talented, so it'll be interesting. And I am going to start training him, so I'm probably going to do cat training videos. But the reason why I kind of haven't is that he's like he's very food motivated, but he still has like some food anxiety, and like I don't feel good about like asking him to do things with food because he's just like he wants the food so badly. So I'm hoping to get that a little bit more relaxed. Like it is getting better. And like to be fair, like he is still skinny, so I think his body is telling him that he needs to eat. And that's why. So I think once he hits a normal weight, it'll hopefully slow down a little bit. Can an animal be dual motivated, like attention / affection and food motivated? Yes. Yeah, like honestly, it's just anything that I find positively reinforcing. So for him, he really likes pets and stuff, and like for recall and stuff, that's really what he's been reinforced by. Is just getting pets and attention. But for like yeah tricks and stuff, I think that food would be easier because it's just it's usually the most highly motivating thing that you can have for most animals. So yeah, like I'm gonna work on that with him eventually and like teach him how to put on the harness and stuff eventually and teach him how to sit and like maybe speak like queso. But yeah, he's gonna learn stuff, but I've just kind of been waiting. So that'll come soon. But yeah, there's gonna be more behind the scenes stuff for like I've been doing like a lot of members only videos if anyone has interest in that. Otherwise, like there's gonna be stuff coming. Like I don't know if I'm gonna do Vlogmas this year. I've done it like a couple times. I'd never do it every year. We'll kind of see how I feel because sometimes I start doing it and then I'm just like, nah, I don't feel like doing anything today. So we'll see because then there might be some fun stuff with the cats. And then I'm definitely gonna do the cat enrichment tour to show like all the shelves and stuff that I've put up so that people can see. And other than that, like, yeah, there's going to be more horse stuff and whatnot coming up because I'm getting a little bit more free time now that my book stuff is kind of planned. Like I was in waiting mode for a while because I just wanted to know what my marketing plan was for the book and what the publisher needed me to do. But I had my meeting yesterday, so that's really great. So yeah, I have plans. But yeah, anyways, I'm gonna go work with Banksy now that I don't have Lint on me. So everybody have a great day. Thank you for tuning in. And if you missed the first part of this, you can watch it because I'll just save this. And thank you, Paula, for being a cat person now because of Lint. He's pretty awesome. I love cats. They're really funny. They're funny little creatures. Never would have thought I'd have 4 of them, but like here we are. But anyways, have a good day, everybody. Oh, are there the same videos on YouTube members and Patreon? Patreon is more heavy on the training content. I'm going to start uploading the backloaded tutorials that I have from Patreon onto YouTube for the subscribers that are over like the milestone supporters level and over. So YouTube right now is like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff, cat content, everyday content, vlogs, discussions, and whatnot. And Patreon's more heavy on the training content. But I'm going to be uploading some of the tutorials to YouTube as well and doing a little bit more of that. But if you're more interested in training content, like training specific Q&As or like behavioral markups, I recommend Patreon because that's where I do a lot of those. And by behavioral markups, I mean like people send me in a video of their horse and then I do a voiceover talking about the behavior and giving them suggestions and stuff like that. And I just started doing that. But other than that, there's like a tutorial library with like 70 plus videos. I'm going to take some of the crucial like standardized videos like teaching the neutral head position, loading the clicker, teaching head away, working with their feet and their legs and whatnot. And I'll upload those to members only on YouTube. But yeah, either way, check them out. I think you can see the titles of the videos and stuff and what I've uploaded on YouTube members if you wanted to check and see what's been up there. Uh, and I'll talk about stuff that like I can release there first. So there's going to be some stuff that's exciting related to the book that I'm going to be sharing to members and patrons only first. But that's probably not going to be till January, so you'll have to wait for that. But because I have to get the go ahead from the publisher. But anyways, thanks everybody. Bye bye.